All right. I'm Ray White, WLIR FM, and did we catch you off guard there?
You did a bit. You did a bit.
Okay, joining us this afternoon is, well, we won't even say who he is. 6 away from 5. We'll just hold up the album for the microphone.
How was it for you?
Yeah, we got that for you right there.
I know. Good old Stevie, eh?
Yeah, Phil Collins is here with us. You finally showed up. We thought you were going to stand us.
No.
Traffic, I heard, is nasty today in New York
Yeah,
City.
it is nasty, and I had a few things to do at the offices, Atlantic offices.
Uh-huh.
So you know what I'm trying to do?
What are you trying to do?
I'm convinced, because I cut my album like a black R&B album,
Right.
even down to the way it was mastered, and the horns on it and everything. And I wanted to go to the office and talk to Cotillion label, like Henry Allen, who's the
Right.
president, because what I want to do is put out Behind the Lines and If Leaving Me Is Easy to the black radio stations, because I'm convinced that in there they would play it.
Sure.
And that's what I've been. That's why I'm late. I'm sorry. I had to get it out of my system.
All right. How would you is mastering an album like an R&B or a black thing different than, let's say, a Genesis record?
I mean, spiritually, it was coming. The kind of music I listen to is mostly black music, and there is a difference. If you listen to a Queen record, and then you listen to an Earth, Wind and Fire record, you'll have a good example of the difference between an English and a black record.
I'm trying to think of a rock record that sounds like a black record.
Well, there isn't really. I mean, basically, it depends. It really is down to the way it's recorded and cut, as well as the ingredients of the music. But I mean, I was coming from the what I consider black ingredients with the people down, even down from the people I used on the album.
Yeah.
And
the Alfonso is Alfonso Johnson.
Alfonso Johnson, yeah, the Earth, Wind and Fire people, and basically, what I wanted to do was, I had a lot of trouble cutting the record. I went to about 5 or 6 people to cut it, and eventually I just decided to look on the back of the Earth, Wind and Fire sleeves and the Jackson sleeves, find out who cut the albums, and it was this bloke Mike Reese, who's in LA. So I rang him up and said, would you do it? And he said, yeah, and he did it, and I'm very happy with the result. But there is a difference. There is life on Mars.
You once said that Genesis is your wife, Brand X is your mistress. What is this record? Your solo project.
Well, I've considered that my record is now my wife, and Genesis is my mistress.
Really?
Yeah, and I mean, I'm my own man now. I mean, I'm still with Genesis, and Genesis are very solid, more solid than ever.
We've been getting a lot of phone calls since we started playing the record. They're worried. People are worried.
Well, I've been actually, some of the press things have been saying ex-Genesis singer, but I mean, we've been rehearsing for 2 months for a new album, which is going to be very, very different because we're using a different engineer. We're producing it ourselves, and we're using the guy that did Peter Gabriel's engineering.
Steve Lillyway.
No, he produced it. Hugh Padgham.
Okay.
Hugh Padgham, and he also did my album.
All right.
And basically, it's left up to me to find producers and engineers, and I really got on with Hugh very, very well. He's a very young, fresh engineer. So the music is very, very different as well. It's not rock and roll simple, but it's simple. It's like got space.
All right, more
mature.
Turn It On.
Well, the best tunes on Duke, we felt, were the tunes that we co-wrote together.
Okay.
And all this album, the new stuff, which could be a double because there's an awful lot of material, is all co-written. So, and that really is one of the main things, because I mean, I've got my outlet now for my songs. Tony's got his, Mike's got his, and we only come together to write because we like writing together. So we don't bother each other with our own material, which is good. It means the band is back to like it used to be in a way. We're just writing together and bouncing off each other. Yeah,
a lot more input or a lot more energy.
Yeah,
coming in. Do you have a problem with Genesis and people being a little too serious in their approach? I think I asked Steve Hackett this a while ago, and he says sometimes it gets to you. In other words, you're a band like The Who, like The Grateful Dead, that people have known over the years, studied, analyzed. They know they've got dossiers on you, pictures, you've got a book on you.
Too many preconceptions is a big problem. I mean, one of the reasons why I sort of become humorous on stage in between tunes is to take people off the edge of their seats and let them relax. But there are a lot of preconceptions about Genesis, which is, I mean, in England, for instance, I changed label for my own solo album to Virgin, because I wanted people to sort of completely divorce themselves from the Genesis thing. There's nothing like a Genesis album, and I wanted people that it can appeal to a lot more people than like Genesis, and people that don't like Genesis wouldn't even give it a listen, because of all the preconceptions and the connotations that Genesis have. And it is a big problem, when it comes down, for instance, playing it on black radio. I don't want them to know that I'm in Genesis because it will turn them off. So I mean, as far as they're concerned, I'm a new artist. and that's, you know, I want it to stand up, pardon the pun, at face value.
Well, we got to cut. This is going to be the first single.
Yeah, over here. It's not the other one, In the Air, is #1 in England right now.
Right. We've been playing that. Your brother did the cartoons on the import.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, he does. He works for Playboy and We and Punch magazine in London.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Phil Collins' story there. It's a minute away from 5 o'clock. I'm Ray White. With me, live in the studio, is Phil Collins, WLIR Garden Cities, the radio station. This will then be the first single. We had been guessing that Behind the Lines would be it over here.
Well, as I said before, you know, that's one of the tracks that I want to put out as a taster to black radio, because I think I don't really want to put it as a single because it's a Genesis tune, and I mean obviously I'm very close to my interpretation of it, but I think it's good for me to have one of my own songs out straight off. I mean there are a few singles on the album that could eventually be pushed off.
I think what you've done too is you've at least blown everybody away, and the reaction that we've had is that you've really slipped out of sort of a Genesis mold that would have had you pegged, and you've jumped all around. And even
well, I like so many different types of music.
Why has it been so long before this album happened? You've been that busy?
Well, if you've got 5 minutes, I'll tell you. I mean, basically...
Sure, we got 5 minutes.
I mean, 2 years ago, I went through a divorce, and this left me emotionally odd and with a lot of time. And so I had an 8-track studio at home, and what I did was I went up to the 8-track... I decided to look at it positively and use it as a stimulus. And I locked myself in the studio, and I just worked and worked and worked and wrote and wrote and wrote. And so, for the first time, I really had a chance to finish songs and to do nothing but write, really. And so, all this stuff that's on the album all had its foundations at home. I mean, I actually took the 8-track tape into a studio and transferred it to 24-track tape, and then carried on overdubbing. So everything was done at home. The keyboards were done at home. I played the keyboards myself.
Yeah.
And the drums and the singing. All the drum machine and keyboards were done at home. Then I went into a studio, and it's a very personal thing. And it's only until recently that I've actually had the time to do this kind of thing. You know, before I was kind of too preoccupied with playing with too many people in a way. I mean, I still do that. I'm very involved with John Martin, who's an English guitarist.
Sure. Yeah, he's been.
And I played on his last album, which is just about to come out here.
It is finally going to come out here. Yeah.
And I'm producing his next one. And.
Is he going to tour over here, John Martin?
I know he's thinking of living over here, but
really?
I mean, this is all speculation, really. I mean, we're doing his next album in London with the same engineer that I used and the same studio, and I guess we'll end up co-producing it because he doesn't really need a producer, to be honest. And I'm whittling the other things I do down to sort of the really worthwhile. I mean, I'm working with Townsend on his next album, and I'm just say John Martin, and I really want to do another one of my own. And I guess between that and Genesis, I got my work cut out for me now. And Brand X doesn't really exist anymore.
It's over with, yeah? Or will it come back again, or do you think it's finished?
It's one of those things that sort of rears its head every now and again. But I mean, you know, a couple of guys live in LA. Percy lives in New York. I live in London. Robin lives in London, well, outside London. We both live very close to each other outside. But he's doing a film. So right now, there's no reason to get together. But it's always been like that, you know. It's always been a very spasmodic thing.
Very busy.
I like to keep busy, you know. It's what's good for me. That's what kind of thing I'm into now.
All right. Set this song up so we can play some music for anybody driving in traffic or stuck in traffic.
This is, so this is going to be the first single over here, and we thought Motown. We put the Motown cap on for this. Again, it's the Earth, Wind & Fire brass. Alphonso Johnson played the bass. Darryl played guitar. I played the piano and the drums. And if you imagine Motown, the old bathroom drums, this is it. I Missed Again.
All right. New from Phil Collins at WLIR FM. Phil Collins is with us. I'm Ray White and WLIR FM, and that's from the new album. And you know, it's such a difference between what's a hit single over here and what's a hit single over there.
That's why I leave it up to the people that know, you know, because I mean, in Genesis, we've had things that we've often thought were potential singles.
Yeah.
And more often than not, we were proved wrong. I mean, Misunderstanding, when I wrote it, I thought, well, this is, you know, this could, if it was given the airing, it could definitely be an American single.
Yeah. And
I thought Turn It On Again could have too, but of course, you know, by the time Turn It On Again came out, everybody had the album, and I guess, I think our fans, there's a lot of record company people that overlook the fact that our fans buy anything and everything, but they won't. No one really will buy a single if it's on an album, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this works for us in England. I mean, anything that's before the album, they'll buy.
Mm-hmm.
But as soon as the album comes out, I mean, no one's got that much money to throw around.
Well, I think
to buy both.
I think something that you've been doing for years with the band is you've been enticing people to B-sides, which is like an old 60s, late 50s thing that you'd find B-sides.
Well, the thing is that on every album we've done, we have material left over.
And that's what ends up on the B-sides?
Yeah, I mean, the songs that don't actually fit into the format of the album, but nevertheless we liked enough to record, and we're not proud of them, you know, it's just that they couldn't fit on the album, which is another reason for doing a double album, you know, because we write so much. And, you know, it's such a restricting format, a single album, because there's, you know, 20 minutes, 25 minutes aside, and if you've got tunes that last 7, 8 minutes...
Sure, you're eating up...
You know, suddenly you've done it and you've only played 4 songs, you know?
Yeah. Will you someday release, possibly, you have Spot the Pigeon, you have the B-sides, is there maybe someday an Odds and Sods, or...
Odds and Sods album?
Yeah.
We've often thought of that, yeah. One thing that's sort of also crossed our mind is I mean, I tape every Genesis rehearsal, and I've got lots of things that are that would be very interesting. I mean, just blows, you know, because that's another thing of double album. Like with The Lamb, we were able to stretch out.
Yeah.
Like Silent Sorrow and Empty Boats and The Waiting Room and little moods that would actually take us into a different area. But because there's no time on a single album to do it, people think we ain't doing it anymore. But we spend most of the time rehearsing, just blowing. And, I mean, some of those cassettes are very good quality. I mean, I take great pride over my Nakamichi cassettes recordings, you know. And, in fact, most of the time we end up referring to them when we're recording the album. You know, so, I mean, that could make a good album at some point. But there are enough songs to do that with, but, you know, they want to flood the market with our stuff.
Do you feel a pressure on you, the band, Genesis now I'm speaking about, not you, Phil Collins in particular, but that now there are a lot of bands who have elaborate stage shows, something that wasn't around back when you started, and you sort of set the pace, you, Pink Floyd, and a few other bands. You feel that you got to outdo yourselves after a while and kind of one-up yourself?
No. I think we just underplay it in a way. I mean, we've come to the conclusion, we came to sort of a peak in 1978 where we had the kitchen sink, you know, we had mirrors above us.
Right.
And the whole works, and 40 people setting it up and taking it down, and 12 trucks, you know, and you think, well, hang on a minute, you can't, this is the end now, this is the end, we'll go completely the other way. So next time we toured, which was, I think it was last year, in England at least, we toured with a very, very simple show. We played the Roxy in LA, for instance, which was just us and the equipment, and just small theatres. And although it's not logistic to do that here, the show will be very simple, because I mean, basically, you know, we can spend £10,000 on a laser that works when it wants to, or you can pay, you know, quarter of that amount of money for twice as much and just as much effect if you just have if it's simply used, you know. I mean, those landing lights are such a simple, you know, effect, and there's nothing to it really. So it's a question of what you use, not what you got, but how you do it. You know? I think you know what I mean. I really do.
What's Peter Gabriel up
I'm
to?
not going to leave this chewing gum here, but I don't know where else to put it.
Leave it on the bedpost.
Yeah.
Do you run into Peter Gabriel and Steve Hackett and the other people?
I run into to Peter and I run over Steve. No, I don't mean that, or do I? Peter and I are very, very good friends. I mean, I did his last album.
Yeah.
And I was very proud of my work on that. I liked the album. I thought it was a very brave album.
Very.
And we were in contact with each other. I mean, he rang me up and said, I liked your album. And I said, great, you know. I mean, so we were in contact with each other. And in fact, just before he recorded that, I actually played in a band with him. Because Mike and Tony were doing their own albums, and I was at a loose end. I was tying up things with my record before I went into the studio. And he didn't have a band, you know. So he asked me, John Giblin, and a keyboard player called Jeff Wesley, and Joe Partridge, who played slide guitar on one track, to form a band. And we did all that Beco and I Don't Remember and all the, you know, Salisbury Hill. We did a tour, basically.
Really? Where?
In England, about 6 gigs.
Huh.
And it was great fun. But Steve, you see, I mean, the only time I've ever seen Steve since he left the band, I saw him once in New York when Brand X played the Bottom Line, and I saw him more recently in Los Angeles when his band played the Roxy when I was on holiday. And I didn't actually get to meet him at that point because, you know, the place was a zoo with Genesis fans, and I didn't really want to sort of get you know, trampled to death. And so I said, I sent a message, why don't you meet me up on the Rocks, which is the bar above the club. And his manager wouldn't let him come, which is a bit odd. I mean, there's some strange things going on between Steve and the band. I mean, you know, there's some legal stuff like writs and all that kind of stuff, and I don't know where I stand with him. He said a lot of silly things that I don't agree with. And it's very easy, you know, like, it's like when you've been with someone for a long time, been in a band for a long time, and you suddenly get out of the band, all those frustrations that you felt over the years, you suddenly let them out all in one go.
Yeah,
and an awful lot of bad feeling goes down. And we were very careful with Peter that, you know, it didn't happen.
Yeah.
But, I mean, to an extent, it did with him, too. I mean, I read some quotes the other day that I said a few years ago, and I don't believe I even said them. I did. I remember saying them, but I can't believe that I said it.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, there's one quote that I said where I know it's the wrong thing to say, but I hope Peter isn't successful. You know, and I can't believe I was stupid enough to say that, because, you know, but it was just at the time, you go through that. It's like a release. And I definitely don't mean that. I mean, I love the bloke.
I listened to, funny you should mention that, a John Lennon interview this morning. It was done by David Wig or somebody like that in '71. And Lennon remembers watching a film about Gilbert and Sullivan, and when they finally broke up, they didn't speak to each other, they fought, and he said, how could that happen? That's so silly. If we break up, that'll never happen. And he said, and there it was, it happened, and he said it was kind of ridiculous, the things that were said. And he said, of course they were ridiculous.
All right.
You going to tour at all?
With the band or me?
No, not with the band, but Phil Collins.
Me,
thing.
well, there's an awful lot of logistics involved. Logistic is today's word, by the way.
Oh, okay.
There's an awful lot of logistics involved in this. I mean, I was spoilt by the amount of people, the class of people that played on the record, you know.
I see what you're saying.
And I wouldn't like to tour without them. Now, I've been to them all. I mean, Earth, Wind & Fire, basically, the horn section, I mean, they've been in touch regularly on a weekly basis, because they're going to do some stuff on the next Genesis album. And they want to tour with me because they enjoyed doing the album. So I said, well, when are you free? I got their dates free. I mentioned it to Chester because I'd get him to play drums. I played keyboards with Peter Robinson, helped me out. Darryl would play guitar, and Al Johnson would play bass. And Shankar would come along and play violin. So it's a great band. You know? But I mean, when someone's free, someone else is bound to be working. Yeah. And in between all this, I got a Genesis album to do, and the other thing, John Martin and Townsend and that. So there really isn't that much time, and the chances of everybody being free the same month. So I think I'm going to end up sort of waiting until I've got about 4 or 5 months off. Well, in fact, the other side of Christmas, I've got about 4 months in which we've all taken 4 months off, and Mike and Tony will start work on their own albums again, and I'll start writing again. We won't put them all out at the same time.
So you're already talking about next...
Yeah, next year. You won't believe it. We're coming here in November. I mean, I know what I'm doing, you know, when I'm 64.
Amazing. Can I play the single? It's, what is it in England this week?
It's not, well, today I heard they went down to 4, but it's had 4 weeks. It's had 4 weeks up in the top 3, so I'm not proud. I mean, I'm very pleased with the way it went. It's #1 in Melody Maker and NME, and it's #2 in Sounds, but I say it went down to 4 today.
And the single is, we have the single queued up. It's slightly different than what will be on the album.
It's slightly edited from the album, and it's got I added some drums to it specifically for the single release.
Okay. It reminds me a lot of the Gabriel, some of the work that you did on the Gabriel album.
This is another thing. I mean, the tracks I did with Peter, again, we used the same studio, same engineer, same room, same drums, same drummer, and the drum sound, for instance, is most like Intruder.
Yeah. And
I did Intruder. I mean, the way that came together is bizarre. I mean, we were getting a drum sound together for another song, and as Hugh, who was mucking about, just distorting and mucking about, and generally sort of mucking about with the drum sound, I was hearing it in the cans, and as it became more and more like the sound you hear on the album, I started playing a pattern that sort of fitted with the sound. And Peter sort of put his finger on the button and he said, listen, give me 10 minutes of that, I like that. So I just sat there for 10 minutes and played it, just the same rhythm, not deviating from it at all. And then he took it away, and he had a song called Intruder that he put on top of that rhythm.
Mm-hmm.
So when people say it's very Gabriel, Yeah,
you threw me a look. I understand exactly what you're talking about.
It's as far as I'm concerned, the thing it's like about Peter's album is me anyway.
Exactly.
So it's half a dozen of one, 6 of the other.
And he, because he released it first, people were...
Yeah, well, he had the same paranoia because Duke came out and Tony has always used that Yamaha piano, electric piano, the grand piano.
Yeah, the grand piano.
With a harmonizer, a chorus box. He always used that sound, and Peters uses it as well because it's a nice sound. And I lent Peter my drum box, right, which he used on his album.
He said to compose a lot of the tunes. He said he used the rhythm machine. Yeah.
And so did I. You know, I mean, it's like there is common ground, but I mean, it's just very dodgy when you say who did it first, because I mean, our record came out first, but I lent it to him. But people think he's more respectable than us, and so they think we copy him. You know, it's
I understand.
It's a tricky situation.
Okay, this is the single.
We still love each other.
Phil Collins at WLIR FM, 17 past 5. I'm Ray White. Phil Collins is with us. In the Air Tonight is the name of that tune. When you did those vocals, and they're, like I told you the first few times I heard the song, it was Chill City. What do you do when you do vocals to get inspired like that? And
Well, that is actually my best vocal I've ever done. I mean,
I would say that.
I don't like anybody in the studio when I'm recording. I mean, there was me, and there was Hugh, and there was my girlfriend, and apart from that, I mean, I even made and actually there was a tape op, and we became a very, very close family during the making of the album. I mean, like, they almost became non-existent in terms of me, you know, not being able to let go. What happens? I mean, I don't like. There's a thing that's starting to happen now with lady tape ops. You know, and I don't like that, because it's like the male instinct is to strut, you know, and the mating perfume comes off, you know, and it really, you start performing, and although you've got to perform to a certain degree, you want to be able to let yourself go.
Right.
And with the end of that song, I mean, I really had to sort of take off my clothes and live, in a way, you know.
Yep.
I had to sort of just, and you know, it's like if you miss a note, you don't want someone saying, "Oh, look, you missed a note," you know, because you sort of think, "Oh Christ," and the throat contracts, and that's the last you'll ever hear of it. So I made sure that there was no one in the studio, and in fact, when I did that vocal, there was just me and the tape op, because Hugh was on the phone, I think, and Jill was out having a cup of tea or something, and so it was literally me and the tape op. And when I walked in the room, he gave me, like, you know, vibe, you know, it was like, he was really happy with it. And I knew that I just sort of opened up and just did it. And it is, you know, I mean, I'd like to get more of that on the Genesis thing. And I started to with Duke. I mean, I was thrown in at the deep end with the singing. You know, I mean, I was in a successful band, and I'd never sung really heavy songs before. And suddenly I was competing with the bands that have had, you know, they've had regular singers for like 10 years or something. So it's only really now in the last, well, since Duke and this album, that I've really started to sort of concentrate on singing and it to get better, you know. But I'm looking forward to doing the next Genesis album, because at least they're giving me the space now to play around with tunes, which is what I did a lot on my album.
So you have a plan of attack. You were kind of blown away then for a while with the vocals.
Yeah, I mean, I enjoyed doing it, but I mean, listening back to it, I mean, I was singing the tunes, and there was a tune to sing, and I had to stick with it.
But getting the soul out.
Yeah, you know, I mean, I can't, which is why I guess singers like to sing their own lyrics.
Yeah.
Because unless you actually sing, it's not easy to write words. I mean, Tony writes words, for instance, that look very good written down, you know, and to read, but they're not easy to sing. And it's, and Mike is somewhere between Tony and me, whereas, you know, I write, I mean, In the Air, for instance, that was an improvised, when I wrote it, the lyrics and the tune I mean, the whole tune and the lyrics were improvised. When I did it at home, I did a guide vocal, and I just sort of sat there, well, stood up, and I sort of opened my mouth and just sang, and the lyrics that you hear are what came out, and the tune is what came out, and so I thought, well, okay, I'll keep that. Because the words don't really mean anything. I mean, there's an overall menacing quality, and bitter, I suppose. But I mean, basically, I'm not trying to say anything, and it's not a story. It's just a feeling, you know.
Feeling, yeah.
And certain words fit certain notes, and on certain notes, if it's a high note, you can't. You know, you have the certain shapes of the mouth and all that, and you don't learn that in a day. You know, you've got to sort of let it creep up behind you in a way.
I just find it fantastic that a song like that and Games Without Frontiers can be a hit record somewhere. And
I know. I mean, I like, that's one of my favourite songs on the album, but I always felt, well, that's definitely not a single, because for a start, it's like a joke. You've got to wait till the end to hit a punchline, you know. And especially in this country, there aren't that many people that are prepared to take chances with people saying, "What the hell is this?" and turning the dial, you know. And it takes a long while to get going, but it delivers. And it's kind of thing, once you hear it once, you think, "Oh, yeah, but you wait till you hear the end," you know. And I'm not saying the end is the best bit, but it has to get there.
Mm-hmm.
And, I mean, a lot of the times, I had to edit it a bit, because obviously, you know, 5:35, which is what it is on the album, I had to edit it down to 4:20. Because if you see 5:35, people will fade it out after 3 or 4 minutes. It hasn't even gone anywhere, you know.
should get the old trick that Phil Spector did with He Lost That Lovin' Feeling. It was really 352, and he wrote 304 on the record, and they faked everybody out.
Right. I'll do that, actually. Good idea.
You got to go in a couple minutes. Phil Collins is with us if you just tuned in. Phil Collins of Genesis, but Phil Collins who's getting ready to release within about a week and a half a new solo album that is just a knockout. What plans do you have when you look ahead to the future? Do you
I see a dark stranger.
I knew you were going to be straight with this one. What do you would you ever go back to acting or anything like that, or what? Did...
I would like to, but I know I'd get depressed because I don't like the way. I don't like not being in control, you know. And I felt when I did acting as a kid, you know, I felt very much as a pawn. I mean, your best seat. I almost feel it like as a drummer in a band sometimes, because your best take ain't necessarily the one they'll use. They'll use the best overall one.
Yeah.
And a scene, if you're acting and you do the best you've ever done it, if it wasn't good for the cameraman, he'll do it again. And it becomes a whole machinery. And the actor star, who people go and see like Jack Nicholson's film, wow, they don't realise really that although in Jack Nicholson's case he's powerful, but I mean generally it's the director and the producer. And you're used as a tool in a way. And I got turned off it when I was a child actor, and it would take an awful lot to get me back into it. And I certainly don't want to do a Ringo sort of Roger Daltrey sort of film.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I want to do something that's got a bit of substance to it. And I don't know, I would think twice. I've been offered, you know, the Old Vic in London, they wanted me to do a couple of Shakespearean things. And I said, A, I haven't got time, which is my main excuse. But B, I kind of thought, well, do I really want to get back into that business, you know? It's not a nice one.
Okay, thank you very much for stopping by. And you want to set up this last song?
Yeah, this is an instrumental tune. This was mostly done at home. I did all the drum machine and the keyboards at home. And if you listen very carefully, you can probably hear my storage heater start in the middle of it.
If I can interrupt for 1 second, the reason possibly that you picked the Beatles song, Tomorrow Never Knows, is because of the drums, the percussive aspect of it, or why did you pick that one?
I chose that because I thought at the time when it came out, it's been one of my favourite songs since it came out, you know, and I thought it was very overlooked. I mean, I always like taking Beatles songs, play them on the piano, the Beatles songbook, rearrange them, and basically I thought the song was a bit far out for the time, and people were into Eleanor Rigby and the Other Submarine, and it was a bit psychedelic for them. And what my version was really, it was done well before Lennon got murdered. I mean, it's ironic that it happens to come out not so long after he got shot, but...
Gee, was there a thought of you jumping on the bandwagon or something?
Well, I would imagine a lot of people will think that,
okay.
you know, in the same way Roxy Music have just done Jealous Guy as a single.
Oh.
You know, I mean, in London, I presume it will come out here. But I mean, that's obviously been recorded since his death. Now I did this at home a year and a half ago. You know, it was all finished, mixed and in the can before Christmas. But I know that some people will think, you know, because some people buy a record on Friday and think you recorded it Thursday, you know.
Isn't that what happens?
Oh, no. But I chose it really, I kept referring back to the original version for the drum sound, because it's like, you know, the old, you know, 4-track George Martin compression. And I tried to bring out the melody a bit more, because the melody was a bit sparse on the original. And, you know, the chords, it's a very melodic song, but they didn't do it very melodically. But I kind of, it's basically a nudge in the ribs and saying, you know, if you think this is nice, go back to the original, listen to that, because, you know, you missed this 20 years ago.
That's a nice way of doing it.
That was my reason.
NK, this is a different song here.
Yeah, this is Hand in Hand, and it's, I say, it's an instrumental tune, and it's one of the ones that I had a whale of a time with the horn section with. It's instrumental. It's basically like Who Dat Man, the Marx Brothers. It's Innocence and Children. Set the controls for the heart of the Amazon.
Thank you, Phil Collins. I'm Ray White, WLIR FM.